Yeah, let's do it. Oh, sorry. Call to order the Brentwood Board of Aldermen meeting for January 7th, 2019. An Alderman Wege is joining us. If you'd all join Alderman Wege and the rest of us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can we have a roll call, please?
Alderman Dimmitt.
Here.
Alderman Kramer.
Present.
Alderman Leahy.
Here.
Alderman Lockmiller.
Here.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
Here.
Alderman Plufka.
Here.
Alderwoman Sims. Here. And Alderman Wege.
Here. All right, fantastic. Item number 3 on the agenda is approval of tonight's agenda. Are there any changes to this evening's agenda? Alderman Leahy.
On the consent agenda, I'd like to remove Resolution 1128 and have it as a standalone, please. This is the potential property personnel for the police department.
Okay. Yep. No problem with that.
Thank you, sir.
So let's see, 9E becomes 11C.
Thank you.
Please. All right. Any other changes to the? Oh, sorry. That's a motion, right? Oh no, that's
Consent
not.
agenda.
Consent agenda. My apologies. I told you I'm not quite with it tonight. Okay. So any other changes to tonight's agenda?
Earlier today, we added on an item under 13, legal, in the closed meeting, so I would ask for a closed meeting after this meeting. For legal
Another one?
matter. Another one, yes.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure we're okay. Yeah, we're going to have another closed meeting. Oh, well, if the board so desires.
Exactly.
All right, so at 13, we'll ask for that motion, and we'll hope that everybody's okay with that. Okay, very good. Any other changes to the agenda? Seeing none, any objection to consent by acclamation? All right, it'll be so approved. Let's see, moving on to announcements. Tonight we have recognition for 3 members who were the leaders of the Brentwood Bound Task Force. Are they here tonight? Are they with us? Actually, we've got, I know Stu's here, Brad's here, all right, great, and I didn't see Mary, so is Mary here? Oh, Lois. Is Lois on there? I'm sorry. I apologize, folks. So, all right. Well, you know what? The recognitions are all the same. So I'm going to let Tom go ahead and read the recognition, and then I'm just going to ask the 3 of you to stand and be recognized. And we've got some nice certificates up here for you. So, how about that?
Surely, Your Honor, this is the Brentwood Bound Plaque in Recognition Building a Bright Future Certificate of Appreciation presented to Stu Clark in honor of your service to the Brentwood community as a leader of the Brentwood Bound Community Task Force in the fall of 2018. The Brentwood Bound Building a Bright Future Certificate of Appreciation presented to Brad Schneider also in honor of your service to the Brentwood community as a leader of the Brentwood Bound Community Task Force in the fall of 2018. And finally, Certificate of Appreciation via Brentwood Bound presented to Mary White in honor of your service to the Brentwood community as a leader of the Brentwood Bound Community Task Force, fall of 2018. Thank you very much.
If you guys would stand up. For those of you who aren't familiar, the Brentwood Bound organization, the community task force, was a group of volunteers, actually, that volunteered their own time to learn about the project and then prepare informational sessions for the public. And so we had several open houses in November that covered a lot of that, and that was largely their doing. They were also involved in going door to door, soliciting feedback and things like that, and they did a lot of other things that were associated with community outreach. And like I said, completely volunteer organization. They volunteered their own time to get involved and do that activity. So we really appreciate their help. Tonight we have a public hearing. Item number 5 on the agenda is public hearing. It's a request to extend the moratorium for the 353 redevelopment area through April 1st. So let's see. Lisa, do you want to give some information before I gavel in the public hearing?
Good evening. Yes, tonight's request for the board's consideration is to extend the moratorium on the Manchester Corridor area through April 1st. If you recall, back in the summer months, back in July, an ordinance was approved by this board enacting the moratorium. So what the moratorium did for parcels that are in the 353 area is the moratorium's purpose was to allow for staff and the consultant to work out a development plan, a master plan for the area, look at the zoning issues there, if we needed to come up with a new zoning district, or if one of our zoning districts would work, or maybe we'd have to create an overlay zoning district, and then also look at the impacts of rezoning property in that area. So we had, the ordinance was passed back in July, and then quickly thereafter we established a committee of residents here in the community, and we worked out really all of our draft documents that we're going to begin sharing with the Planning and Zoning Commission and with the board. We're also now ready to move forward with the public engagement component of this project. The deliverables have been prepared since December, but we really still needed, everything kind of still hinged on the development plan in terms of what we would find out from Jacobs Engineering, getting to a certain point with all of their study and a 30% design. So now that we have that information, we were able to finalize a draft of the master plan. And as I said, we have an ordinance together now that will be going through the review process. So the moratorium is, in essence, really just to allow now the time for the review and the implementation of the products that we've put together.
Alderman Plufka.
I just want to ask the question, is April 1st going to be enough time, or are we going to be doing this again?
We did go ahead and put a schedule with your packets, and yes, I do believe that it will be sufficient time to get this done.
Okay, even with interaction between planning and zoning and all of that?
Yes, we've got, we're going to go ahead this Wednesday night as a regular meeting of the P&Z. So we will be having our consultants, and there are members of PGAV that are here tonight, but we will be giving a presentation to the Planning and Zoning. It's kind of a joint meeting with both P&Z and the impact, the members that have helped us with the products. So, and then we will be having an open house with the public again later in January, come back to February, keep reviewing it with the P&Z, then ultimately these products would be in front of you in March of this year.
Good. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you, Lisa. I'm going to go ahead and gavel in the public hearing on the moratorium extension. If any member of the public would care to come forward and address the board regarding the moratorium extension, I ask that you just come forward, state your name and address for the record, and the board will hear you. So without further ado, I open the public hearing on the 353 moratorium extension. Anyone care to address the board regarding the 353 moratorium extension? All right, going once, going twice. Sold American, the public hearing on that is over. Item number 6 on our agenda is public comment. This is different than the previous opportunity. If you care to address the Board of Aldermen on any subject that you wish, step forward, give your name and address, and you'll be given 3 minutes, at least 3 minutes, to address the board. So, is anyone care to come forward and address the Board of Aldermen about any subject of their choosing?
Hi, my name is Sam Longstreth. I'm the owner of Brentwood Plastics at 8734 Suburban Tracks. In July this year, I was talking to my neighbor, Andy Truss. He was speaking to a couple people, and I just wanted to talk to Andy. And it was the city administrator and the attorney that you've hired for the whole Brentwood bound thing. And I was told at that time, I said, do you have any interest in my property? Because they were talking about how they might want Andy's property for an easement. And they said, no, we definitely do not. And then I was eating lunch and I looked in the Pulse and there was a 2-page foldout of where the path was going to be going for the dog park. And I saw that it was going right through my property. And so I contacted the city administrator, had a meeting, and I was told, yes, we most definitely do want your property. And I think that you guys have no concept of what's going on inside Brentwood Plastics. We have huge pieces of equipment. It's very expensive. We've got 483 phase power coming into the plant. We've got 9 blown polyethylene film machines, and moving us is going to be very burdensome in terms of dollars. And I just don't think that you've thought this through about how much money is going to have to be spent to do these things. Apparently, I understand that the reason the path has been rerouted is because there was a bridge that was designed, and then you found out that it was going to cost $8 million to build an ADA compliant bridge. And I think that a lot of this project hasn't been thought through from an economic standpoint in that how you're going to pay for it. And the tax dollars that are going to have to be extracted from the citizens of Brentwood for a park. And I think it's something that you guys have not fully thought out how you're going to fund this.
Thank you.
I'm Audrey Duchel, and I want to comment on the bike path. We have a building on Breckenridge Industrial Drive, and I received a notice and comparable buildings to ours, which were not comparable in any way. And I spoke to a man who was with the Jacobs Engineering or Architectural the last time I was here. And he told me the reason they want our property is to straighten out the drive there to connect it to Breckenridge. It's a pretty expensive thing to take a building and straighten out that one little corner that is going out of the way to do it. It's and there's no solid answers for anything. We don't get anything that we can really plan on. It's we've never had a flood in all the years. We've been there over 50 years. We're built 2 feet above the floodplain, and we have never had a problem until MoDOT made their mistakes, and they even flooded Old Warson Country Club homes. That wasn't our thing, and it's upsetting to see, like, well, this is a good thing. It isn't a good thing for everybody. It isn't, and I don't know why they have to make the path. The building that was next to us, the Advanced Carpeting Company, was originally on the maps that we had seen, painted pink, meaning that that was one that they were going to take. And I noticed it's been changed to just an easement now. I don't know why we couldn't be an easement. I don't know any pressing need to straighten out that road so people can race through a little faster. That's not for the bike path. That's for the cars that go through. I hope you'll consider some of this. It's personal for me, and I feel it strongly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carol Zuschel Grover from Zuschel Equipment. As you can see, this is wreaking havoc on my mother. We have been there for over 50 years, and again, we've never had a flood problem. It's not just our company, but it's several companies. And I think when you talk about buying some of the businesses on Manchester, some of those storefronts have been empty anyway. But we are businesses. We are not a storefront. We have warehouses. We employ employees. And it's not just us, it's Midwest Floors, Advanced Carpeting, it's just the gentleman who spoke. Quite frankly, I was standing in the back of our warehouse and I was watching a semi come out from the back of one of the buildings where you want to put a bike path, and I call that a lawsuit waiting to happen, because to have bicycles going through where you have semis coming through. This is an industrial court. That's one reason we're there. The location suits all these businesses for us so that we can get across to Illinois easy. There's not many places that we can relocate. I can tell you Midwest Florida doesn't need to relocate across the river. They've already got a place out there. You know, we have paid our taxes in earnest. We've been good stewards. We've hired many people. And as you can see, again, it's my mother's taking it personally. We're all taking it personally, quite frankly, because we employ people. And I don't think you realize moving a business is quite an ordeal. So we wish you would take that in consideration. I mean, truthfully, I drive by Queenie Park every day, and which is a busy park when the weather is nice. I drive up and down Mason Road every day. I can guarantee that park is empty during extreme heat and during extreme cold, and St. Louis has a lot of that. So I don't think you're gonna see a bicycle path. I mean, quite frankly, where's the bicycle path gonna go once you go through the industrial courts? I mean, it's gonna have, you know, is it extending farther west? You know, you've got the Katy Trail, you've got all sorts of other parks, but I can guarantee a park that I drive by every day that's used, and of course it has an ice skating rink and everything else. In severe weather, it's empty. No one's gonna be out there riding bicycles or hanging out in parks in extreme weather. Just doesn't happen. And as I said, I drive by it every single day, if not once, twice, or 3 times. So I wish you'd take that in consideration, because you're affecting not just the owners of the business, but the employees. In this day and age, I don't think a lot of people want to see people being put out of business. It will be a hardship on our business, as it will for other businesses. So I wish you'd take that in consideration.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bob Frederick.
Bob, that microphone actually will slide up if you, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I'm Bob Frederick, owner of Frederick Roofing. We're at 8,000 Manchester. Been there 47 years. I don't know how many times I've been in this room the last 25 years talking about different situations on Manchester Road. I don't know exactly the situation. I do have some questions for somebody. Is this situation going to fix the flood problem that we have on Manchester, or is this a solution to not having less headaches?
So the way the citizen comment works is we don't have a dialogue at this time. So go ahead and state your questions, and
well,
when we have a chance to respond.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, here's being there 47 years. I've seen a lot of situations. We're going to change this, change that, change that. At the end of the day, no money, nothing's been done. I don't know how many meetings I've been. I mean, at least 2 dozen, okay? Then we talk about fixing the flood situation. I'm assuming this new project is gonna fix the flood situation. The problem I have with that is for the last 25 years, everybody on Manchester has been dealing with the flood issues. We never had a flood issue come into our building, only at one time, which she stated about the construction on Highway 40. But besides that, you always had to worry about if we had 2 inches of rain, what the situation is. And to sit here and pay the taxes we do on Manchester for the last 25 years and to see nothing's been done about the flooding. And then when the flooding situation is going to be fixed, first thing we're going to do is get blown out, which I think is an injustice, because we sat there, dealt with this for a number of years, been proud of Brentwood, been proud of being on Manchester Road, great location, and great area for being centrally located in St. Louis. And to see this, it's kind of like, you know, really pulling the rug from underneath our feet. I mean, the property tax on 8,000 Manchester to be there is very expensive. When it's flooding, when it's not flooding. If I wanted to sell the property, the issue was the flood property, okay? So I know when you guys are buying the property, we're gonna be probably bought as a flood issue. Well, the issue, if you fix the problem, the city would have fixed the problem 20 years ago. We've been talking about this. Fix the flood issue, let the city, let those people on Manchester do what they can do with their buildings, develop Manchester like everybody else down Manchester from the city to the county is done. You don't see parks on Manchester Road. You see them in some areas where parks are being used. So to me, it doesn't make sense. It seems like a lot of money for very little usage of a park or a bike or whatever you guys are doing. It looks good, but at the end of the day, I think it's going to be expensive, very expensive. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else care to come forward and address the Board of Aldermen? Anyone? Bueller? All right. Thank you very much. So would any of the aldermen care to respond? All right. I actually will make a response, and my response is this. Please stick around. Many of the questions that you have asked will be answered in a presentation I'm going to be making tonight. And I think, if you can spare 20 minutes, I think that many of the things that you've asked about will be answered. If not all of them, fine. Catch me after the meeting. To the person who made the comment that there aren't any hard answers, I went ahead and invested, set aside 2 hours per night for the last 2 weeks on 3 different occasions, actually 4 different occasions. And I went and reserved a room at the Brentwood Rec Center and advertised an opportunity for any citizen who cared to come and ask any question they want, whether it's Brentwood Bound related or otherwise. But primarily in the hope that people who had questions about Brentwood Bound would come and we could have a discussion about it. And I, in fact, at only one of those meetings, we had a small audience show up of about 6 people. And I think over the course of that hour, we did give some very hard answers to some very specific questions. And so, what I'm struggling with is I believe that there's sort of a failure to communicate here. There are answers to your questions. This is not just a park plan. This has been going on for 2.5 years, and it's actually pretty well thought out. And it's, look, I understand that it's not going to affect everybody equally, and I understand that that's going to cause some people some frustration. What I can tell you about that is we are bound by law and absolutely intend to fairly and equitably compensate every single property owner that has property that we need to acquire as part of this project. And we are only acquiring properties that are absolutely necessary to complete the project. So, I've said this, I'll say it publicly because I've said it to many of the property owners. I would much rather give a property owner some money for their property than pay a lawyer to condemn it, right? And that's the way we've been handling the negotiations thus far, and that's the philosophy we're going to continue to use in these negotiations. And like I said, I understand your frustration. If you're one of the properties that's impacted by this in a way that means you've got to move your business, I get it. But I can tell you that it is well thought out, and if you will please stick around and can spare 20 minutes for a presentation that's coming up, I think you'll see that that's in fact the case. Anyone else think of anything while I was busy yakking on? All right, very good. Item number 7, Mayor and Alderman reports. I'm going to withhold mine until the presentation prior to the bill. So we'll go with Alderman Dimmitt.
No report.
Alderman Kramer.
No report at this time, Your Honor.
Alderman Leahy.
Thank you, Your Honor. Forgot to turn the
Dan,
button
forgot
on.
to put on your button.
Couple public announcements, if I may. The Ward 3 meeting for the month of January will be held on January the 29th, Tuesday night. The location has been changed, and all of this year, the meeting will be held in the Brentwood Rec Center at 7 p.m. And it is an informal meeting for anybody that would like to come and to discuss issues that are going on in Brentwood. We also are hosting a blood drive on Friday, the 25th of January in the Brentwood Rec Center. We have 2 rooms going. We're looking for about 145 pounds of blood. So if you're up to helping us out and healthy and would like to grab a couple of your friends and come join us for a blood drive, that would be wonderful. And one more, if I may, Your Honor.
Please.
On Saturday night, January 26th, the Brentwood Century Foundation is hosting the first trivia night for our 100th birthday for the city of Brentwood, and they're looking for people to come out and enjoy. So grab 8 of your friends and get online at the Brentwood Century Foundation get a table and come test your knowledge and have some fun with us. Thank you, Your Honor.
I will warn you that my table has already acquired my 2 ringers, so your chances will be somewhat limited, but go ahead and give it a shot. Okay, Alderwoman, Alderman Lockmiller, sorry.
We'll have our first Public Works Committee meeting of the year right here on Wednesday, the 9th at 4:30. Thank you.
All right. Alderwoman O'Neill.
Yes, 2 items. One is that Ward 4 meeting will be at the end of the month on the 29th, the same night as theirs, but at the Brentwood Forest Clubhouse at 6 o'clock. Anyone is welcome. And the other is, as library liaison, I would urge everyone to go online or visit the library and look at all the new programs that they have done. There have been many children's programs in the past, but there are many new adult programs ranging from book discussions to having an artist come in to teach sketching. So go down or get online and look and see what they're doing and get involved.
Kathy, didn't I read something about drinking and reading as well?
On Friday nights, once a month.
Oh, Friday nights, right. So those of you who like to drink and read, pop on down to the library for a quick one. Alderman Plufka.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dave Dimmitt and I will meet at the Rec Center tomorrow night, 6:30, for the Ward 1 meeting. We will be talking primarily about Brentwood Bound and about the votes we're taking tonight and the votes we anticipate to take later this month. Thank you.
Alderman Sims.
No report.
Alderman Wege.
No report.
All right. Madam City Administrator.
Mayor Thornton, I thought perhaps you would want to provide an update following our meeting with the mayor of Ladue.
Oh, yes, thank you. I meant to do that sooner. So, this morning I met with Mayor Spiewak and the Director of Public Works from the City of Ladue. We met at their office at the Ladue City Hall regarding the traffic study and crosswalk on McKnight Road. The long story short is Mayor Spiewak has agreed to take that proposal that we gave to her Board of Aldermen, provided that the City of Brentwood meets the site development requirements that it would require of any other project. So basically they want an engineer to sign off on the plan and so on and so forth. But long story short, they had a few edits to the contract that were liability related in the sense that we designed the cross. Their position is that we're effectively designing the crosswalk, and so we would, sort of hold them harmless from any design defects or whatever. I think Kevin is going to be looking at those, but I looked at them and quite frankly, I don't think they're going to give anybody any heartburn. So pending a satisfactory resolution of all those sort of technical issues, she anticipates taking it to her board on the 22nd, and she's going to recommend that they approve it. And she has also agreed that if the study comes back and says that the crosswalk should go there and that crosswalk is the appropriate place to have a crosswalk, that Ladue will reimburse the City of Brentwood for half of the cost. So I thought that was a very fair and reasonable position on her part, and I think it's a nice basis for our cooperation going forward.
Don't they use the same traffic engineer we do?
No, well, actually, we have a traffic engineer in the city now. We have an on-call engineer, but our traffic engineer is sitting right over there.
I was going to say, wouldn't the design come from the same place from either city?
Yeah, well, the crosswalk design is what they're worried about, David. And I think it's mostly a question of where it's located and the grading.
I understand that. Okay.
And we've already done this. It's work we've already done. I just don't think we've submitted it to them formally. So they just want to make sure that it's... again, her concern was that all the I's were dotted and T's were crossed so that we're not running a slipshod project on them, which I'm sure we would never do.
Thank you.
Make sense? Yeah, so like I said, I felt very good about it. I felt like it was a very, very good foundation for some cooperation going forward. I'll be anxious to see how the study comes out and so on and so forth, but I thought especially her offer to reimburse us in the event that the study shows that the crosswalk should be permanently located in that position was pretty fair. Thank you, City Administrator Conde. Do you have anything else? Okay. You're not going to talk about the Brentwood Bound stuff, or is that Craig?
That's up later. Or
oh, no, it's item
now?
number 8. We're on 8.
Oh,
cost
okay.
Update.
Well, Craig?
Good evening.
Craig Schlitter with Navigate Building Solutions. I'll be providing the Brentwood Bound update for January 7th of 2019. The very brief update, there were limited expenses on the warrant list. There were no investment costs on the warrant list. There were no direct project costs. There were only a few indirect or sunk costs, which include Brentwood Bound informational marketing materials and 6 property surveys.
Okay. And as I mentioned before, there would have been on this warrant list a closing for the property on Manchester that I advised the board about earlier, but that's been delayed 30 days. So look forward to that. Any questions about that? Okay, seeing none. All right, we are on the consent agenda, and pursuant to our discussion from last night, I'll ask Alderman Kramer to give a brief synopsis of the consent agenda items.
Surely, Your Honor. Aside from the standing committee reports, the minutes for the November 5th meeting, the minutes for the November 19th meeting, we have a few items, including the liquor license application for 314 Sports Management LLC, care of Edward Basta at 1427 Strassner Drive. That's basically in proximity to the County Blueprint Company in the Hanley Industrial Court. The 314 Training Academy is what they're doing business as, and they've applied for a liquor license for that facility at 1427 Strassner Drive. As well, Resolution 1129, the Creative Communities Alliance, the CCA, is a coalition of municipal and nonprofit organizations dedicated to the development of community arts in the St. Louis region. As more communities cultivate quality art programs, the CCA provides a supportive network for these areas to come together, learn from each other, and promote the arts. Sculpture on the Move project makes it easy as possible to install high-quality, original artwork in the community and enhance the public space with minimal cost and a short-term commitment. And finally, on the consent agenda tonight is the warrant list with the operating funds and certificates of participation proceeds. The warrant lists are presented for review and approval. The 2018 operating budget, $102,956.94. 2018 certificates of participation proceeds, $12,480, and the 2019 operating budget, as quoted here, is $41,706.11, all part of tonight's consent agenda.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions regarding the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded that the board approve the consent agenda as submitted. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call, please.
Alderman Dimmitt,
Yes.
Alderman Kramer,
Yes.
Alderman Leahy,
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill, Alderman Plufka,
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims,
Yes.
and Alderman Wiggy.
Yes. All right, thank you. That all the items on the consent agenda are now approved. So the next item on the agenda is the first reading of Bill number 6229. Mr. City Attorney, can we have the first reading by title only, please?
Bill number 6229, first reading, an ordinance of the City of Brentwood, Missouri, imposing a sales tax for economic development purposes and providing for submission of the proposal to the qualified voters of the city for their approval at a special election called and to be held in the city on April 2, 2019.
Thank you. So I actually have the honor of presenting the board information on this, and the board got a preview of this presentation, or at least certain members of the board who are available over the holidays got a preview of this information. So this is essentially that presentation again, but it's now in public consumption form. I've had a chance to tune up all the numbers and make sure they're correct and so on and so forth. So without further ado, I'll get into the presentation, and that should be putting it on our screens since I pushed the magic button. But I still just see Brandon.
That's not great, Brandon, but...
Yeah, I was hoping for better, frankly. Are you at a super secret Boeing location, Brandon?
I wouldn't tell you that.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
What's wrong that we're not getting a presentation?
Well, I don't know. Yes, it is. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we actually have a synopsis for Bill 6229. So I'm going to ask Alderman Kramer to read it while we're working out technical difficulties with our new whiz-bang system here.
Your Honor, the Mayor and the Board of Aldermen regarding Bill 6229 of the City of Brentwood, Missouri have determined that it's in the best interest of the city to impose a sales tax of 0.5% on all retail sales made in the City of Brentwood, Missouri for economic development purposes, including but not limited to the Brentwood-bound projects. And the proposed sales tax cannot become effective until approved by the voters at a municipal, county, or state general primary or special election. A special election is hereby called and ordered to be held in the city on Tuesday, April 2nd, 2019. Bill 6229.
I'm reasonably technical. Base unit on. Oh, well. Could not connect to base unit. Okay. Yeah, that's what I did. Last time it was solid when I hit it. Oh, it quit. Sure, why not? Yeah.
I'm curious as to why we are asking and calling this a special election if we already are holding a regular municipal election for offices in the city of Brentwood on that date.
It's not a regularly scheduled subject for the election.
So because of that, we have to have its own.
It's just the terminology for putting something additional on the ballot that's not otherwise scheduled.
Will this increase our cost to holding the regular April election?
No, sir. Well, no, I'm sorry. The cost is allocated in part by the number of things each entity has in an April election.
HDMI cable?
One more question on one city isn't moving the dial.
Thank you.
I had a question as well.
Sure, go ahead.
All right.
Yep.
And it's actually for the city attorney as well. Could the ordinance that's before us here be altered such that it would not affect the proposed language under Proposition B that'd be placed on the ballot, but would also or otherwise provide for some sort of a guarantee in the form of a prohibition that the Board of Aldermen would not impose this tax should it pass until we receive the certified letter of map revision from FEMA? Could we add that to one of the sections?
We would have to rewrite the ordinance.
I understand that, and I'm asking whether or not it makes more sense. If that's something that I'd like to try and do, is it better that I try to include it as part of this ordinance, or should I be looking to try to introduce a separate, like a resolution or something separate, standing alone, that could be voted on separately come the time for the second reading of this?
We would have to restructure this ordinance, so if we could look to suggest some language for your consideration before second reading.
Okay.
But
does that derail us?
Section 1 says we're imposing the tax.
I know.
It's approved by the voters.
I know.
So we would have to restructure that.
And that's really what the language I wanted to get at was, and this gets to, not so much a question so much as a position, but until I'd like to provide that, I'll call it a safeguard into this ordinance, so that as we're talking to citizens of Brentwood who have to vote on this in April, that we are prepared to talk to them to say, look, we understand that this is something that is obviously expensive. It's transformative for the city, but we also don't know yet for certain whether or not FEMA is going to actually pull those 30-plus acres out of their mapped floodplain as a result of what we're doing. We believe that's what's happening because that's what our engineers are telling us, and we understand. I'd just like to provide an additional sentence or two within this ordinance or in a separate resolution that would guarantee to the voters that as they're passing this, they understand that we will not impose this tax unless or until we get some agreement from FEMA that we're on the right track engineering-wise.
I guess my question on that, and Dave and I have had this conversation,
Right.
so I'm not attacking. It's purely what I said. My initial reaction is that such a resolution or ordinance would be an attempt to bind a future board to a course of action, which of course I don't think would be enforceable. So, but I don't know that. I'm not the city attorney. You are, so.
I would not try to draft that on the fly tonight.
Okay.
There will be a second reading at another meeting, and I'd be happy to try and have language that you can look at in advance of that.
Do you have any sense, I'm not asking you to incorporate language, but do you have any sense generally whether or not I'm on the right track in terms of trying to change the language of this ordinance or to adopt some sort of standalone resolution that would affect this ordinance?
I think you should address the subject in this ordinance.
Okay.
Okay, so
That's
I'm
question.
gonna
Thank you
cut it
very
off there. We got into the Q&A period because we had some technical difficulties, and I wanted to make use of the
there we
time. But this is the presentation, and there's a lot of people who are here, so we're going to go ahead and do the presentation, and then if you have questions afterwards, you're more than happy to help. Okay, so folks, the topic for tonight is Brentwood Bound, and specifically tonight I want to address the taxing and finance analysis, okay? So there have been a lot of questions about Brentwood Bound, what type of project it is, et cetera, et cetera. Many of those questions were covered at the open houses that were held at the beginning of November and so forth, and we'll touch on them in this presentation. But this presentation really gets down to the nuts and bolts, and that is, the economic, the tax, and the finance analysis for the entire project. And so there's going to be three parts to the presentation. The first one is going to be the Brentwood Bound project area. I'm going to break down for you the current tax revenues for the Brentwood Bound project area, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here in a few minutes. I'm going to talk about the acquired properties, right? So the Brentwood Bound project area consists of these acquired properties that we've talked about, which unfortunately the businesses on the acquired properties will be largely relocated. Then there's an area of this project that's sort of scoped out for redevelopment, and that is what I'm calling the redevelopment area, and that is mainly an area just south of Manchester Road that will be out of the floodplain as a result of this project, and then can be redeveloped. And then the third thing I want to talk about is the impact on the city, the library, and the pension funds in the school district. And so, we're not the only ones affected by this. And Dr. Lane is here he's our superintendent of our Brentwood School District. And, I think it's important as we undertake these decisions to keep in mind that there are other people affected by them, and the school is a big part of that. So they make their living on city property taxes, and so anything that puts businesses out of our town is of interest to him. The second part I'm going to cover is the Brentwood Bound redevelopment area conceptual plan. So in this redevelopment area, right, we had to, in order to come up with some projections as to what the redeveloped area might be able to generate for the city, right, in terms of economic development, we had to come up with some rational assumptions about that redevelopment area. And so what we did was we worked with Lisa and her team and the folks at PGAV to look at this redevelopment area as a developer might, right? And so what the big thing that I want to say there is that it's a conceptual plan, right? This is not, we didn't have a developer. We don't have a developer. We're not, we've talked to a few developers, but it's very preliminary. We don't have a plan for this area. But in order to get some rational numbers about what this area might generate, we had to make some assumptions. And so that's what this plan is. So we'll talk about potential sales tax revenues, we'll talk about property tax revenues, we'll talk about other revenues, gross receipts, personal property, business license fees. Those are the main sources of revenue to the three city entities, which are the general fund, the pension fund, and the library. The other thing I want to talk about a little bit is intangible benefits. So I think there's a big component of this project that folks are missing, and that is, benefits that I can't put a dollar figure on, right? But the fact that you get up and you actually have a place to go that you're not kind of ashamed of and so forth in that entire portion of town, I think has some benefit, and I want to talk a little bit about that. The final thing I want to talk about is sales tax analysis. And so, as you know, the economic development sales tax that we're recommending is an economic development sales tax. It's a half-cent sales tax, right? And so I want to talk about what effect that will have on the Brentwood tax rates. I want to talk about special taxing districts. Specifically, I want to talk about transportation development districts and community improvement districts. And then I want to talk about projected revenues from the economic development sales tax and then how those funds might be used, okay? So it's a lot of ground to cover. I think I promised 20 minutes, and I'm going to do my best to hit that mark. As I was preparing this speech, I was able to get it in about 22 minutes each time. So first of all, when I say the Brentwood Bound project area, there it goes. When I say the Brentwood Bound project area, this is what I'm talking about. And if you look on the screen, you will see that this is Brentwood Boulevard over here, right? If you can follow my mouse bouncing up and down. This is Manchester Road right here. And this is Hanley over here, okay? So the Brentwood Bound project area is this yellow outline, right, that kind of goes around this entire area, okay? That's what we defined as the Brentwood Bound project area. And those lines aren't drawn arbitrarily. They're drawn to encapsulate sort of the businesses that are most impacted by the flooding, right? Those are for the most part, those businesses in that area are the ones that are most impacted by the flooding. And I also like to point out that there are no residential properties involved in this area at all. Okay, there aren't nothing that's zoned residential in this area at all, right? It's all commercial, it's all business, it's all that type of property. So this is the area. This is a picture of basically the same area. And when I talk later on, I'm going to be talking about the Brentwood Bound area, which you just saw. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the Brentwood Bound redevelopment area, right? And again, roughly speaking, and I'm going to get back to this slide a little later, but roughly speaking, the Brentwood Bound redevelopment area is this area here that is just south of Manchester Road, right? This whole area comes out of the floodplain as a result of this project. And thus, when it's out of the floodplain, we think it's likely that that area will be available for redevelopment. And we're going to talk about this slide in some detail later, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on it here. But this black outline box that you're seeing here is roughly what I would call the Brentwood Bound redevelopment area, right? It's a significant portion of the area that we're talking about in the project area, okay? And then finally, we're talking about the Brentwood Bound property acquisitions, and somebody referred to this in the earlier comments. So the properties that are numbered in colored pink, right, are properties that would be acquired for flood mitigation. The ones that are numbered in colored green would be acquired or already have been acquired for Great River Greenway Trail connection. And the ones over here in purple are ones that are owned by actually outside of Brentwood. They're in the city of Webster or something like that we may need to acquire. And I'd like to also point out, just because we have a dot on it doesn't mean we need the entire property. I think there was reference to easements. For example, I think it's very likely that there will be an easement on this property and some of these properties along here, right, that would be necessary, not the entire parcel. Other places, for example, this parcel here, this parcel by the Oxbow, those are, the entire parcel is required for the project. And
Mr. Chairman,
this one,
if you just could you point out again? I didn't see where your mouse was when you're talking.
Oh, I'm sorry, my mouse. Yeah, so it's trailing pretty badly up there. So if you look at the Oxbow here, this is where the creek sort of does a dipsy-do type of thing. That property right there, the city owns that property. We acquired it about 1.5 years ago, and so. This property on the other side of the creek from the Oxbow is a property that we're requiring all of. The Serco properties that we were supposed to close on at the end of this year are these two properties right here. And those properties would be acquired as part of this deal. So as you can see, that when I talk about property acquisition, it's all the properties. Yeah, and I see Mrs. Zerschel is looking. This is the Zerschel property right here, right? That's this one right here. Anyway, that's what I mean when I talk about the property acquisition. Okay, so let's talk about what that Brentwood Bound area looks like. So if you break down the Brentwood Bound area tax revenues, you can see the first line of this is actually Brentwood bound project area. Well, actually, the first line is the city of Brentwood. So the entire city of Brentwood last year generated $15.299 million in sales tax. 2 square miles of Brentwood generated $15.299 million in sales tax. Okay, that's more sales tax per square foot, I think, than any municipality in Missouri. Pretty sure. We generated real property taxes of $1 million and $1,042,000. We generated personal property taxes of about $326,000. We generated gross receipt taxes of about $1.5 million. We generated a total revenue for the city of Brentwood of $18,196,000. That's our total revenue to the city of Brentwood. You'll notice that other than personal property tax, our residents, the people who live here in Brentwood, don't pay any of those taxes unless they shop in Brentwood. Okay? This is very different from many other municipalities that you may be aware of. Okay? Or if you own a business here in Brentwood and you live somewhere else, I encourage you to go look at how your taxes are being paid in your municipality. You will not find this sort of structure. It's very different. So the question is, in the Brentwood bound project area, how much of this revenue is being generated by the Brentwood bound project area as a whole? Right? I'm not interested in any particular part of it. I want to know as a whole. The answer is in sales tax revenue, it's $391,000. Right? In property tax, real property tax revenue, it's $94,800. Right? In personal property tax revenue, it's $11,000. Gross receipts is about $100,000. Right? For a total of about $597,000. Right? So if you look at that entire area in the yellow outline that I showed earlier, it generates 3.2% of our total revenue. Okay? Now, for such a geographically large portion of our town, I will tell you geographically it accounts for almost 1/4 of our town, right? But it generates less money per square foot than almost any other part of our city, okay? The redevelopment area, right, so breaking that down further, now we're just talking about those areas that are just north of Manchester and particularly the ones that are south of Manchester, right? The redevelopment area generates about $341,000 in sales tax. As you can see, that's almost all the sales taxes that are generated from that area. Well, that's not hard to believe, right, because the strip mall is right there. There's, you know, the time for dinner and all that. Most of the retail sales that go on in that area go on the area that's right along Manchester Road, right? So that makes a lot of sense. The real property taxes are about $54,000, about half the real property taxes generated. Personal property tax, the businesses along there are retail. They have very little personal property, so they don't generate much of that at all. And they generate very little of the gross receipts, almost half of the gross receipts revenue. But again, they mostly generate sales tax for a total of $443,000, or about 2.5% of the Brentwood's total revenue. Okay. If you look at just the acquired properties, and now that's the ones with all the little buttons on them that I said, hey, you know, if it's green, if it's pink, if it's, right? You're talking about $49,000 in sales tax, almost $50,000 in sales tax. You're talking about real property taxes of about $27,000, and this is all of the acquired properties as a whole, folks. This is not any one acquired property. This is all of them. This is if we got rid of every single one of the businesses on those acquired properties, this is what you're giving up. Okay, your personal property tax is about $8,000. Your gross receipts is about $31,000. You have a total of about $117,000 of tax revenue that comes from the properties that are going to be acquired or anticipated to be acquired as part of this project, or about 0.6% of the total revenue to Brentwood. So, look, folks, I don't have an agenda, right? Ultimately, this is your decision. This is their decision. I don't even get a vote, right? What I can tell you is that I'm in favor of people making their decisions based on facts. And the fact that if somebody says to you, hey, you're putting all these businesses out of business and you're giving up all that revenue, the truth of the matter is, here's what you're giving up. You're giving up $117,000 per year on an $18 million budget. That's what you're doing. All right? Like I said, whether you think that's good or you think that's bad, I don't care. I just want you to have the facts. And that's the fact. Okay? The Brentwood School District is a little different. As I said, they get all their money from property taxes, right? The Brentwood bound project area generates about $548,000 for the school district. And the reason that's different from the city is because the school district has a much different tax rate, right? Their tax rate is approximately 4 times what the city's tax rate is on real property, right? And so they generate a total of, between real and personal property, about $608,000 from the project area. The redevelopment area accounts for about half of that at 321, right? And the acquired properties for them is about 213, or about 1/3 of the total money that comes out of that area, right? So because they work on property taxes and because they tax property at a much higher rate, they have a much higher stake in the acquired properties actually than the city does, right? In terms of revenue, right? If we look at it just, and again, I am not being dismissive of the concerns that were brought up here before. I understand. I'm just trying to present the numbers, right? There are more behind these things than numbers. There's history. There's businesses. There's families. I get that, but I'm just trying to present the numbers this evening, right? And we can talk about all that other stuff once we get the numbers right. Okay. So here's the conceptual redevelopment plan again, and here is where I want to talk just a little bit more about it, right? So if you look and see on this graphic, if you can follow my mouse, this blue area represents the existing floodplain, and what we've done is we've sort of overlaid it on top of the existing floodplain, right? The new floodplain actually is going to be right along here, right? So after the flood control project is finished, all of this property that's behind the sort of green tree line that you see here is going to be where the floodplain is, okay? Now, as Mr. Frederick pointed out, there's been a lot of people talking about a lot of different things on Manchester Road. Yeah, there have been, and this one actually will work. This will actually reduce the floodplain to that area that you see right there along the creek. Unfortunately, Mr. Frederick, you know, your property adjoins the creek, and in order to get the creek down to a level where it doesn't flood, your property is kind of one of the ones that we would need to involve in the flood mitigation effort. And it's due to your physical location. It has nothing to do with, you know, anything else other than the engineering of the project. And that's true of all of the properties that are along the creek here. It's your proximity to the creek for the most part that controls whether or not we need your property for part of the flood mitigation, okay? We are, with the exception of a couple properties over here, which we can talk about in terms of rerouting the Great River Greenway, you're really talking about all properties that are acquired in this whole area over here are acquired in order to complete the flood mitigation. The truth is, folks, it's a lot of water. We are at the center of a 37 square mile watershed, and when it rains hard and it rains fast, all that water from all of West County ends up in Brentwood. And when it does, we got to have a place for it to go. And if we don't give it a place to go that's along the creek, which you see here, then what it will do is it'll go and flood Manchester Road and all over the place. Okay, so all we're talking about doing is rebuilding the creek and restoring the natural floodplain of the creek to keep the water in the creek. That's it. I mean, I'm oversimplifying, and Phil is squirming in his chair. It's much more complicated than that, but that's the truth. It's really just giving that water a place to go. The redevelopment plan calls for, and again, these are just assumptions, right? These are residential properties, multifamily residential properties on both ends. The reason that they're there is because this one is very proximate to public transportation across from the Metrolink. Right? These are very proximate to the trail system, right? So the idea is that people would want to live close to the trail system so they could walk and bike to work, etc. An entertainment area here, which would be some sort of entertainment venue. Perhaps it'll be a movie theater, possibly a microbrewery, you know, who knows, right? And then a lot of retail along here, but smaller retail, right? They're not big box stores. There's no Costco's in here. These are small retail venues where people could open up you know, independently owned businesses, right? And you know, on the north side as well, right? So the reason, as I said, and then finally some office space over here, right? Or perhaps even something like an adult care facility or something like that, right? So some type of office type of use on this end over here and on the back side over here, okay? Look, what we were looking to do is just establish some rational parameters around which we could generate some numbers, because people say, well, if we do this, how much would it benefit us? Well, that's a fair question to ask, but in order to answer that question, I have to have something to base, other than just deciding I can take a wild guess, I have to have something to base my answers on. So the answers that you're about to see to that question are coming from these assumptions. It doesn't mean we're going to do this. It means that if something like this happened, these are the answers you would get, right? Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead. All right, so this one's a little smaller, and I apologize for that. I tried and tried, but it's important that you be able to see the before and the after at the same time, and I just couldn't figure out any way to get it to the same spot. So I'm actually just going to jump to the conclusion on this one. If that development that you saw, that conceptual development that you saw took place, right, you'd be looking at sales taxes from the Brentwood bound project area of about $912,000 per year. Okay, if you recall, the old sales tax number was $391, right? That's an increase of 76%, right? For real, tax increase, sales tax is 233%, right? If you look at real property increase, right, the increased values of the new properties, right, you're looking at 175% increase in the tax value of that redeveloped, that Brentwood bound area. If you go into the redevelopment area, it gets even higher because, again, most of the revenue from the area comes from the redevelopment area, right? So you're looking at 52% tax increase on sales tax, right? You're looking at a 217% increase. Let me tell you what's not in these numbers, right? There are no personal property taxes assumed. I couldn't even begin to tell you what personal property would look like for an entertainment district. So I left it out. They're going to have some, but I don't know what it is. So that number in this calculation is 0, right? The gross receipts. I can't begin to tell you what type of business might move in there that paid gross receipts tax. We assume 0. It won't be 0. There'll be some. We left it out, right? So again, the whole idea was to give a basis for giving you these numbers, but to also be conservative about the assumptions, right? To say, hey, let's not go crazy when we assume the lease rates, and let's not go crazy assuming the property values. If we don't know what the gross receipts revenue is going to do, let's assume it's 0. And then anything that comes in on gross receipts will be gravy, right? So all of that numbers, none of those numbers control that stuff, okay? If you look at the acquired properties, the loss is 100%, right? When the city comes and acquires the property and relocates the business, right, what does the city get out of that? Nothing. There's 0% tax revenue coming from that area, right? But if you look at the net, the net is that the Brentwood bound project area before constituted about $600,000, right? If you look at the Brentwood bound project area after, you're looking at about $1.5 million, and that's without any of those things that I was talking about. So clearly, there's a relatively good chance to increase the productivity to the city of that area if we move forward with this and get the flooding under control, okay? The school district is the one that doesn't do quite as well. And to be honest about it, look, that redevelopment's not going to take place overnight. If we complete the flooding project by 2023, which is the schedule, right? Then the redevelopment would take place, and let's assume that it would be a 5-year project to get a development built and get it fully leased. So during that time, everybody would suffer, right? As a result of the fact that we've invested this money, right? And it takes some time to get that up. So, but if you look at a steady state condition, if you look at the school board, what happens is they gain on the Brentwood bound project area, the value they gain from 600 to 820, right? But what they lose on the property acquisition side is almost balances it out, right? So the net on this one for the school district is that it's about the same. It's about a draw, right? Because they lose all the property that's in there, but the property that they do have goes up in value, okay? Now, I say that. And I told you I was going to talk about intangibles. Here are the intangibles. The concept, oh, sorry. My bad, I need to back up. The intangible is this, right? In this case is this, that you saw multifamily housing in there, right? Condos, right? Apartments, 3-bedroom apartments, things like that. The chance to, and there's nothing to say that there won't be residential development as part of this plan, right? Again, it was a conceptual plan, right? So there's an opportunity perhaps to add more families to the school district, right? There's a chance. And the other thing that we didn't take any into account was the fact that, you know, the houses on Cecilia, for example, that are right now just up the street from a massage parlor might be just up the street from something that's maybe a little more attractive. Well, I'm not sure, but I think that might increase their property values, right? And as those residential property values increase, the tax revenue to the school increases by the same amount. So, you know, I think it's important to look at this area and say, hey, these are just for the project area. Again, very conservative. But if you look at that entire area, if you look at the neighborhoods over on Brazos, right, I think those streets see a real bounce in property value as a result of the fact that there's this, you know, sort of rebirth of this area of the city taking place. And I haven't made any attempt to quantify any of that, right? Because it's really hard and almost impossible to do. But I think, you know, if it works out anything like this, then I think it's very likely that you'll see a pretty significant rise in property values in that area. And you know, I think that's all to the good. I really do. I think that's good for our citizens. I think the final thing is I think with the vision that you just saw, right, if it works out again, anything kind of like that, I think it's an asset that's unique in St. Louis. Right? I don't think there's anywhere in St. Louis that has a walkable, bikeable, water, urban creek area, right, that is in proximity. You know, you can find it if you go out to Winghaven, right? If you want to live in Winghaven, go ahead. But right here in Brentwood, you have an asset, you have something that's very, very attractive and connected to 22 miles of regional trails and so on and so forth. I don't think there's anything in the city that can compare to it. And I don't think, quite frankly, I don't think there's anything in St. Louis County that can compare to it if we do it right. All right, so those are intangible benefits. Now I want to talk a little bit about sales taxes, right? Because this is really about economic development sales tax, okay? So these are the Brentwood-based sales tax rates, and if you shop anywhere in Brentwood right now, the base sales tax rate that you pay is 9.113%, okay? So if you go down to Schnucks, will you pay 9.113%? Well, the answer is maybe. Depends on what you're buying. If you're buying food, nope. Food's taxed at a different rate. But if you're buying charcoal lighter fluid, yep, you pay 9.113%, okay? Same at the refined room, same at these places on Brentwood Boulevard, until you get down to certain special taxing districts. And if you look here, folks, the state of Missouri is 4%. The city of Brentwood accounts for, right now, about 2.5% of your total sales tax, okay? That's all the money that goes to Brentwood. And actually, we don't actually get all of this 1%. This is the county-wide. We keep a significant portion of that, as we're an A city, but we don't keep all of it. So that's the part of sales tax that Brentwood controls. All the rest of these are out of our control. We don't have anything to do with them, right? We just pay them like everybody else. Okay, so the next thing you need to understand is special taxing districts, and most people don't know about this, and I will be very honest with you, I didn't know nearly as much about them as I do now 6 months ago. But it's very, very important stuff, because this affects how people's sales tax rates are determined more than anything else. Okay, they consist of two different things: community improvement districts and transportation development districts. Okay, they're separate taxing entities, and they're formed to fund improvements in a particular area. Okay, so they are separate and apart from municipalities. They are separate and apart. So they're formed by statute to do something. Right? And it turns out we have quite a few of them here in Brentwood, and we have quite a few of them in the properties in the areas that surround us, particularly in Maplewood and Richmond Heights. Okay? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. We have 5 of them. They collect up to 1 penny sales tax, right? And most of the ones in Brentwood do collect a 1 penny sales tax. And so that's how you get to the tax rate of 10.113%, that if you go over to Micro Center, like I do almost every day, you pay 10.113% on stuff that you buy at Micro Center, because it happens to be in one of these special taxing districts, okay? So let's talk about them. Special taxing districts, here are all the ones in Brentwood. Number 1 is the Brentwood Eager Road. That is the Drury Hotel and the Bonefish Grill. Number 2 is the Mac Daddy of all taxing districts. It's the Transportation Development District, Hanley Road Corridor Transportation Development District. It's this giant thing right here. And the reason it's so giant, it actually is this one as well. The reason it's so giant is because it was a conglomeration of many different taxing districts that were in place. And so when the Point and the Brentwood Promenade were developed, all of those special taxing districts got rolled up into one Mac Daddy, and that is the Hanley Road Corridor TDD. Okay. We also have the Hanley Station TDD, right? And we also have the Manchester Road TDD, which is the Best Buy and all that over there at the Meridian. Okay. In Richmond Heights, they have several. They have the Brentwood Clayton Road TDD, which is this one up here. That's actually part of how they're going to fund some of the improvements to that lot for the new hotel that's going in next to the Spring Hill. They have the Francis Place TDD, which is better known as the Boulevard. Okay. They have the Cheshire Inn TDD and CID, which is over here for the Cheshire Inn. It's so tiny you can't hardly see it. The crossings at Richmond Heights, which is the CID, that's Menards. Oh, sorry, the crossing is not. The crossing is the Red Robin and the hotel that's going in next to the Red Robin. And then you have the Hadley Township TDD, which is the Menards. Okay, so that's that one there. And in Maplewood, you have their portion of the Hanley Road Corridor TDD. And you also have the Deer Creek Center TDD, which is down there where, what is it, Babies R Us and some of that? I don't remember what's down there now. All right, so I'm just going to run through these real quick, right? This is the one in Brentwood. So what these guys do is they borrow money, and they use the 1% sales tax to pay the bondholders, okay? So what they do is they borrow money for a particular project, right? They tell the bondholders, hey, we get to collect 1 penny on all the sales in this district, and we're going to pay you over time, and when the bonds are paid off, then the district goes away, okay? Or in the case of a TDD, it goes away after 40 years whether the bonds are paid off or not, okay? So that's how this stuff works, and it's kind of like TIFs in a way. There's no sharing of revenue, but it's just a financing arrangement, right? It's a way to get a parking lot now or a fountain now or something like that, right? Or a ramp or a railroad track that goes over the road instead of at the road, right? It's a way to get that now and then pay it off over time, and that's what these things do, okay? Like I said, the Mac Daddy of them was the Hanley Road Corridor TDD. It borrowed $51.5 million, and it invested in various improvements. The most expensive improvement that it invested in was probably the jug handle when they were redoing Highway 40. They built a jug handle interchange here to preserve the access to Eager Road, right? Well, that was very important for this district right here because access to the district would keep the shoppers flowing. And so they spent a lot of that money to do that, right? But they did a number of other projects in this district. The important thing I want you to note is in April 2026, their debt is paid off. They're on track to pay off that debt in 2026. And what happens to that district? It's a TDD. So what happens? In 2026, it disappears. And that 1% sales tax that they're taking goes with it. Okay, so the point I want you to take away from this, folks, is that due to these special taxing districts, where you shop, right, is how much, there's no one sales tax rate in any city that you go to, right? It depends on what you're buying, where you're buying it, right? And they don't stay static, right? Well, once they get a sales tax, they never repeal it. Well, that's not really true. This one's going to go away as soon as the debt's retired, right? And again, I'm not telling you sales taxes are the best thing in the world, but I am telling you that this is how it works. It's complicated stuff, and I'm trying to make sure that everybody understands it. All right, so here's the one up at Eager Road, the Meridian, right? Here's the one over at Hanley Station. It's Buffalo Wild Wings. It's the Hanley Station Apartments. It's the hotel, right? Ace Hardware and Office Depot have a CID that was established when that development came in, and they took down the Sims and redeveloped that area. Sorry, I jumped ahead to Richmond Heights. This is the Homewood Suites Hotel. This is the area up there at Brentwood and Clayton Road, right? So if you go up just a little bit north of here, that's where that is, okay? This is another very big TDD that happened. Oh, sorry, nope, this one. This is another very big TDD that happened. So they had to build that parking garage, and the way they built that parking garage up at the boulevard, right, was they borrowed for a TDD. And so a lot of that money went to build that parking garage behind the boulevard so that they could get the shoppers in there. And guess what? It worked out very well. They're going to pay off that in 2025. So the extra penny that you're paying in sales tax when you shop at the boulevard is going to go away in 2025 as well. Okay. So I'm going to walk through these quickly, but you get the gist of it, right? Is if it's a successful development and it generates a lot of revenue, the TDDs pay off early, the CIDs pay off early. If they don't, then they run the 40 years and then they disappear, okay? It just depends on where you shop, what you're going to pay for the sales tax, okay? So what's an economic development sales tax? Well, it's different, right? Economic development sales taxes are authorized to municipalities. It's not a special taxing district. It's a municipality tax, okay? So does the one municipality tax that Brentwood is not collecting. We are collecting all the other available municipality taxes, but we've never collected an economic development sales tax. It's authorized by statute for up to 1/2 cent, right? And the 1/2 cent is added directly to the base sales tax rate. So it would make the base sales tax rate in Brentwood 9.6113, right? Revenue must be used for economic development. It can't be used to run the city. Can't be used for all sorts of other purposes. Has to be used for economic development purposes. Has to be approved by a majority of the voters at a special election, right? So again, that's the issue that we're going to decide to, well, we're actually going to decide it next meeting. But that's the proposal that's on the table tonight, is the bill that would put this on the ballot, right? So it would, the idea is to put it on the ballot, let the voters vote whether or not they approve the special sales tax or not. Once it's collected, once it's approved, the Board of Aldermen actually has to vote to assess it, right? So just because it's approved doesn't mean it automatically goes and grabs it. The Board of Aldermen can actually, they can suspend or repeal the tax at any time without the vote, right? So we can always give money back to the taxpayers. We can't vote to take more. So if the Board of Aldermen decides, and this is to David's point earlier, what he was talking about is if we get to a point where it doesn't look like things are working out on the project the way we hoped, and it's not going to generate the kind of economic development that we hoped, we can suspend, the Board of Aldermen can suspend the tax, right? I don't get a vote, but these guys can. They can suspend the tax or they can repeal it. If they decide that it's not going to be needed, they can repeal the tax, right? Now, you say, well, politicians repealing a tax, that never happens. Well, actually it does, right? In Brentwood, we have had authorized by the voters for the past 20 years a residential property tax of about 42 cents per hundred, right, for the general fund. The Board of Aldermen has not collected that tax for more than 20 years, okay? They didn't need it. That's because that $18 million number I showed you before, we could find things to spend that money on. But, you know, as a matter of responsible government, we're not going to go and put the tax burden on our own citizens when we have enough money coming in from these other sources. And so, you know, I would argue to you that if you vote in favor again, and here I am going to show a little bit of, approving the authority for the board to assess the sales tax is not the same as having a sales tax, right? They still have to go collect it, and they always have the power to stop collecting it, and you always have the power to come up here with torches and pitchforks and force them to stop collecting it if you want them to, okay? It does not indebt the city. It's an economic development sales tax. It's a straight half-penny tax. It all goes to the city, right? There's no debt involved. If there's debt involved, right, it's because the Board of Aldermen has, in a separate transaction, voted to approve debt and promised to pay that debt with some of that half-cent tax. But the economic development sales tax at all does not indebt the city. In fact, it generates revenue for the city that can only be used for economic development purposes. How much is that half-cent worth in Brentwood? Brentwood did $660 million in retail sales last year. $660 million, okay? Half a penny on each of those $660 million transactions works out to about $3.2, $3.3 million a year, okay? That is a lot of money, folks. I will tell you that if every single person who lives in Brentwood spent all of their disposable income in Brentwood, right, we could account for at most 25% of that money, and we don't. We don't even come close. Okay? Largely, the taxes are paid by the people who visit our shopping districts, and that's because we have shopping districts that people want. We have Whole Foods, we have Target, we have Trader Joe's, we have a very family-friendly liquor store. We have very good retail shopping areas, and that's why people come here, and that is a big source of revenue for us. If we lay on this half-cent sales tax specifically for economic development purposes, right, we would generate about $3.2 million a year. Okay. So here's what our tax numbers would look like with the economic development sales tax. Like I said, it goes straight on to the base rate. So if you went to Schnucks or the Vault or the Refined Room, right, you would find that you're paying 9.6% instead of 9.1%, right? And in the Hanley Industrial Road corridor, it'd be 10.613. Right? So when I go over to Micro Center and buy a router, right, I'm going to pay 10.613, right? Until 2026, when the Hanley Road corridor pays off its debt. Then what's going to happen? It's going to drop down to 9.613. Okay? So the point, again, the argument that I've heard is that we'll be uncompetitive, right? People who really pay attention to sales taxes, we might be uncompetitive for a period of time, but then we're actually going to be more competitive for a period of time after that, right? Once that debt gets paid off, right? I submit to you that people don't know any of this stuff, and quite frankly, they don't, you know, they might look at their receipt and go, wow, that seems like a lot. That's about as far as it goes. And in fact, that's what the research shows. But that's the truth, right? The truth is that's what the sales taxes would be if you approve this economic development sales tax, okay? The HRDC TDD includes Whole Foods, Target, Trader Joe's, World Market, Micro Center, Dearborg's, Home Goods, Home Depot, right? So it's all, most of the major retail that we think of when we think about retail in Brentwood is part of that HRC TDD, okay? The other special taxing districts wouldn't be affected by this, right? So they would continue to be at 10.613, okay? So if you go to Buffalo Wild Wings, right, and buy something that's taxable at that rate, that's what you would pay, right? You're outside of that HRC TDD. Retail's not in a special taxing district, like I said, Starbucks, all those places, 9.613. I threw in this in just to remind you how big that HRC TDD is. It's enormous. Okay, so the proceeds from the economic development sales tax, if it's enacted, right, what would we do with that money? What we would do with that money, we would fully fund the Brentwood Bound project. Okay, what does that mean? Well, the total projected cost for the project is $74.5 million. Okay, in 2018, we borrowed $42 million, right? So we would need an additional $34.3 million to fully fund the Brentwood Bound project. Okay, some of the proceeds from the economic development sales tax, as I said, could be right, set aside to pay off bondholders and allow us to borrow that additional $34.5 million, okay? The estimated debt service for that over 25 years is about $2.8 million, right? It all depends on the interest rates, and Jim Leahy's here, and he'll tell you that he can't possibly predict that in the future, et cetera, but you can get round numbers, okay? But as I said, the estimated annual revenue from the economic development sales tax, if you approve it, is $3.2 million. So again, it's clear that the economic development sales tax, which is largely paid by other people, would be more than enough to fund the rest of the project. Okay? The excess revenues could be used for unexpected costs. They could be used to retire debt early. They could be used to do anything that's within the permission of the statute for economic development, right? So, and I don't think anybody on this board has any intention of going out and looking for new economic development projects. I think we've got enough on our plate with Brentwood Bound, so that would probably be the way it would go. The Brentwood economic sales tax, so here's what happens to happen, right? The first thing is this Board of Aldermen has to vote to put Proposition B on the April ballot, okay? And that's what tonight is about. The bill that we've introduced tonight is to put the proposition on the ballot and let the people decide whether it's going to be allowed to take the economic development sales tax or not, right? If you approve it on April 2nd, then the Board of Aldermen has the ability to collect it, okay? And they can collect it starting in October of 2019, okay? They're going to decide whether to use those funds to finance debt or not, right? I would not recommend to the Board of Aldermen that they go and take out debt until they're completely sure they have a project that they want to finance, right? But once they do, then I would recommend that they call Jim Leahy and they go and find out a way to turn that money into some cash so that we can get that project done, okay? The point is that by approving the economic development sales tax, if you vote in favor of the economic development sales tax, it puts the Board of Aldermen in a position to authorize debt to fully fund the project, but that doesn't require them to. As I said before, they can simply vote to suspend the tax, right? If they're not in a position to push the project forward, or they're not comfortable for some reason, they can simply vote to not collect the tax, okay? But if you don't approve it, then there's no chance they can collect the tax, and that, well, I'll get into that in just a second. The point is the Board of Aldermen is in complete control. So why do we have to do this now? Well, we heard a little bit of talk earlier about a CLOMR, right? A CLOMR is a conditional letter of map approval, or map revision, right? And that's the document that actually comes from FEMA that says, hey, yeah, your floodplain is now going to look like this once you do this project, right? That's the thing that matters, because that's what takes all that land out of the floodplain, right, officially, and makes it ready for development, okay? That's going to go out in January, right? Actually, in about a week, Phil, week or two. The approval of the Clomar is expected no later than August of 2019. Okay, at that point, that's kind of a major hurdle, and we've heard a lot of talk about that. But once FEMA approves that, you know, as long as we build the project according to what we applied for, they're going to redraw the map according to what they said that they would do, right? So that takes a lot of the risk out of it with respect to the flood control. Okay, the engineering plan for how to redo the creek is on schedule to be fully complete and ready to be bid by March of 2020. Okay. What does that mean? Well, by about this time next year, we're going to be putting together bid packets. We're going to be putting together, you know, construction drawings, bid packets, et cetera, et cetera. Well, in order to do an RFP for a project of this size, and we're talking about a $24 million RFP, right? In order to do a $24 million RFP, you have to have your project fully funded. There is not an engineering construction company in the world that is going to come in and bid on a $24 million job and then find out that, oh, we only have $12 million. Can we pay you half? They're not going to do it. They're not going to invest the kind of time and money that it takes, right? So in order for them to issue that RFP, they have to be ready in 2020. Now, we don't have to do it like that, right? The project can sit for a while. But as I was pointing out, the economic development sales tax, and why I think it's important to put it on the ballot now, is to put the board in a position to go ahead and fund that if everything goes to plan, okay? And then, like, that's the last part, right, is the Board of Aldermen is in a position to fully fund the project if and only if they determine that it's proceeding according to plan, right? Does the board have any questions? Alderman Lockmiller.
Economic development sales tax at a half cent. We retain that whole half cent, unlike some of our other sales tax that we have to share with other municipalities.
Correct. It's 100% us. The only restriction is that it be used for the economic development purposes as outlined in the statute.
Okay.
Alderman O'Neill.
Yes. As the proposition is stated, the money would be used to, including but not limited to, flood mitigation, transportation, pedestrian greenways, and economic revitalization. Including but not limited to worries me. The intent would be to cover the flood mitigation project, all three of those. Mm-hmm. So, but not limited to could open the door to anything else. So how do we?
I'll let you ask the drafter.
That's the language of the statute concerning use of the funds. That's why it's there.
It's a state regulation. We have to state it that way?
Well, that's what state law says the funds can be used for. So we just imported that language here so that everyone would know these are the uses of the funds that state law allows.
But would the state wording allow us to take out but not limited to?
I'd be happy to look into that and discuss it with you at an appropriate forum.
All right, and I have another
Go ahead.
question.
Sure.
This is open-ended. There's nothing that says when all of this project is paid for, the 1% should stop. How do we put a sunset clause on this?
Well, well, maybe I should let the city attorney speak to that, but you certainly could, by ordinance, by the bill, sunset it. The issue with doing that is you do lose some of your flexibility in terms of your financing.
Wow.
In other words, well, so the bondholders, right, see this stream of income, right?
Yes.
And right now it's $3.2 million, but they know that 25 years from now that stream of income may be less, maybe more, right? So
Okay.
if you specifically limit that stream of income to 25 years, right, then the bondholders will charge you some sort of premium for the risk that in 25 years it's different and you may default because you don't have that stream of income anymore, as opposed to giving you 30 years to make payments and just, allowing you to keep paying longer than what's required, right?
But it doesn't even say 30 years. It's
No, and that's the point I made in the presentation. It's entirely up to the Board of Aldermen, right?
Okay.
But that's not to say you certainly could put a sunset provision in.
Thank you.
Alderman Leahy.
Well, that was where I was headed with my earlier question on sunsetting. Could you sunset it by establishing that the cost of doing this project, when fully paid, eliminates this tax? Now I've limited
That
to,
I don't know.
but not including any other project, because would sunset to
Yeah,
define just this
similar
project.
to what a TD. I don't know the answer to that. I think Kevin has answered. Let me answer on his behalf. He'd be happy to look at that at an appropriate time.
Second question I have: would this tax be included in any online purchases initiated through the city of within the city of Brentwood?
It would be treated just like any other sales tax with respect to online that we're authorized to take or not.
So those revenues could be a plus too.
Correct. If we are empowered to take online sales taxes, then yes.
Thank you.
Alderman Dimmitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on both what Alderman Plufka and Alderman Leahy just said, I'm in support of Alderman Plufka's idea, that is changing the ordinance to include some type of limiting language that the board would not assess this sales tax, this half-cent sales tax, until at least one or maybe two events. The first would be a positive or recommendation or an acknowledgement from FEMA through the Clomer, and then number two, that the proceeds would only be used to satisfy any bond issuance or any type of indebtedness, instead of putting in a date certain. To your point, Alderman Leahy, maybe if we could craft it in such a way that once that indebtedness is paid off, then the board will no longer assess this half-cent sales tax.
I think Kevin is taking copious notes, so I would expect that if you want to. So what I'm going to propose for all of this, just so you know, what I'm going to they're taking notes, so I'm going to ask Kevin to reach out to each of you with respect to potential amendments, and have an individual discussion with one or more of you, so that he can draft an appropriate amendment, and then at our next meeting we can offer those amendments, and they'll be pre-done, so that we're not sort of doing it on the fly. I think that makes the most sense if that's okay with the board. But
Great. I just have one question, and I don't know the answer to this, so Mr. Leahy or somebody like that might be able to answer this. Don't these certificates that we anticipate issuing, assuming that this Prop B passes, don't they have a maturity date or a finite date? And couldn't we tie some sunset clause to that and not experience any detrimental effect with regard to the attractiveness of the investment? Yeah, that's.
Go ahead, Jim.
That's my question.
Yep.
From the standpoint of the Jim Leahy, Stephen Nicholas, from the standpoint of the bondholders, that would work. I can't address if that works from a state law standpoint. That would be a question for.
So maybe that's an option too.
Yeah, I think the issue comes in a workout situation, right? If you go into technical default, right, and you know, if your tax ends at 25 years and you're in a workout situation, you've got a lot of pretty limited choice. That would be my guess, but I don't know. These guys certainly know a lot more about it than I do. Alderman Wege, we didn't mean to forget about you over there in Seattle.
No questions. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for this one? If that's acceptable to everybody, then I will direct the city administrator and the city attorney to work with any and all of you who by email indicate that you'd like to offer an amendment. He'll craft the appropriate amendments, and then on the 17th we will have as many as we need here pre-prepared and ready to go. And that way we can simply vote to include the bits and pieces that, or not, as the case may be. Okay, very good. Thank you all for listening. I as usual, exceeded my time limit, but
Only by double.
Only by double. You're right. Well, when I practiced it, I moved a lot quicker.
Yeah.
I apologize. Sorry. We have tonight's agenda still. Item number 11B is ordinance number 6230. Is that correct?
That's it.
I'm doing this from memory, folks.
Yes.
6230, Mr. City Attorney, can we have the first reading by title only, please?
Bill number 6230, first reading, an ordinance extending through April 1, 2019, a moratorium on development or change of use of property located within the eastern portion of the Manchester Road sub-area plan, study area, to allow sufficient time for a proper land use study effective community engagement, comprehensive plan update if necessary, and consideration of any appropriate zoning text amendments or other actions.
All right, let's see. This one is Lee's. Oh, synopsis, please. Alderman Kramer, sorry.
Yes, Your Honor. A little greater detail on 6230 requested the Board of Aldermen adopt an ordinance extending the temporary moratorium on development and change of use of properties located within a portion of the Manchester Road sub-area plan as identified in the 2018 Comprehensive Plan. The moratorium was approved by the Board on July 16th of last year by adoption of Ordinance 4847. During this extension of the moratorium period, an amendment to the Comprehensive Plan, the establishment of a proposed new MC, Manchester Commercial Corridor Zoning District, and a city-initiated rezoning of parcels to the proposed MC district will be presented to the public, reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and considered for adoption by the Board of Aldermen. This all has to do with Bill number 6230.
All right, thank you. Let's see. Lisa, is there anything that you want to tell us now that you hadn't told us earlier?
I think everything has been covered. I'm certainly available for any questions. I do want to note, though, that this hearing tonight was published, and also that notices were sent out to all property owners that would be involved with this. There's 80-plus property owners, and those notices were sent December 20th. They had materials not only about the hearing, but as well as what was going on with the Brentwood Bound project. And I did also want to just point out that because this moratorium will be expiring January 16th, staff is requesting first and second reading on this ordinance.
Tonight.
I'm sorry?
Tonight.
Tonight, yes.
Okay, so we would need a motion to go ahead and do a second reading this evening if the board were so inclined.
So moved.
Second.
Unless you have questions. I'm sorry. We do have, Alderman Leahy had a question. I'm sorry, Lisa.
I heard from one of the property owners that is along the Manchester Road corridor, and in discussions with Lisa earlier, they have 2 empty rentable parcels or portions of the building complex that they're in, one of which, by continuing the moratorium, they can do nothing further with. It will stay empty. The second one, they have a current tenant that may consider wanting to expand into the open facility if discussions go that route. And it's our understanding that if that would go proceeding, the moratorium may not prevent that expanding of the space that is currently down there being used to work with. So we did do some back discussions just so that we could clarify it for the property owner. I told her I'd follow up on it. I think getting the moratorium extended helps the city, but it also has certain ramifications for different businesses down there. But for the 90 days, we're not going to hurt that too bad in what we're doing.
I didn't really catch a question in there. So is that something Lisa needed to do?
I wanted to clarify and put it on the record that there is a facility that is caught in all of this in the moratorium.
Got it.
But based on the way we're doing the moratorium, one of their parcels can be worked with, the other one could not.
Got it. Okay.
The situation where it's a legal non-conforming use, and it actually lost its non-conforming status because it's been vacant on its own for over a period of a year. So the only thing would be to try to bring back the use that it was before, but that would require applying for a conditional use permit, and applying for a CUP is on hold until the moratorium is through.
Yeah.
So they
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, very good. Any other questions for Lisa? Seeing none, well, I had a motion in a second. I'm going to ask for it again. Motion in a second to...
Second.
All right. So moved and seconded to, and you'll stop me if I'm putting words in your mouth, have the second reading of Bill 6230 immediately.
Beautiful.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
It was posted that way.
Well, yeah, but we still have to, by ordinance, we have to vote to do it. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Okay. Brandon, I didn't hear you. Are you okay with this?
Aye.
Aye, great. So by unanimous consent of the board, we'll have a second reading of Bill 6230. Mr. City Attorney, second reading, please.
Bill number 6230, second reading and consideration for adoption. An ordinance extending through April 1, 2019, a moratorium on development or change of use of property located within the eastern portion of the Manchester Road Sub-Area Plan Study Area to allow sufficient time for a proper land use study, effective community engagement, comprehensive plan update if necessary, and consideration of any appropriate zoning text amendments or other actions.
All right, I would entertain a motion to
Your
perfect.
Honor, I move to perfect Bill 6230 into ordinance form.
Moved by Alderman Plufka, seconded by Alderwoman O'Neill to perfect Bill 6230. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Alderman Dimmitt,
Yes.
Alderman Kramer,
Yes.
Alderman Leahy,
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill, Alderman Plufka,
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims,
Yes.
and Alderman Weggie.
Yes.
Bill number 6230 passes and upon signature of the mayor becomes ordinance number 4867.
All right, so 30-day extension of the moratorium is approved. Say again?
90 day.
Oh, 90 day. Yeah, my apologies. 90 days. First quarter. All right, very good. And then, if I'm not mistaken, we have resolution
1128.
Yeah, 1129?
28.
28, my fault. Resolution 1128. So before we get started, I'd like to have a motion to adopt 1128 as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Alderwoman Sims, seconded by Alderman Plufka to adopt 1128 as submitted. Is there any discussion? Alderman Leahy.
Thank you, Your Honor. This morning, or actually yesterday, you all received an email, and I sent one to the city administrator asking questions on this resolution. I have not gotten a response back that I can read. So thus, I have no answers, and that's why I'm pulling it off.
If the mayor would recognize Chief Speece, he can answer your question.
Sure, Chief Speece. Before we get too far down this road, I'm going to ask Alderman Kramer to just read the synopsis real quick. I'm sorry, we've gotten out of the habit of that, so I've gotten out of the habit of that, so we're gonna back up just a little bit. So bear with us, Chief.
No problem, Your Honor. This is formerly a portion of the consent agenda, Resolution 1128. The police department's requesting to enter into a one-year contract with an individual who would be responsible for the management of the evidence and property room at our Brentwood Police Department. The contract would be paid no more than $18,000 for the 2019 fiscal year. This was an approved item in the 2019 budget, Resolution 1128.
All right, thank you. So, go ahead.
Do you have the email, Chief?
I sent a response to your email, yes.
It was sent out to the board this morning.
11:30.
Yeah.
My system does not have it. That's why I'm asking to work with. The first question that I asked, and I'm doing this from memory because I can't seem to get into it, was, if I'm not mistaken, we are, thank you. Oh, super.
I wanted to know how it was currently handled.
Yes. How are we currently doing property storage and records and all of this?
Currently, it's being done by our detective bureau.
Which is the way we've been doing it for how long?
I don't have any idea.
When you became the new police chief, you didn't change what we've been doing in the past.
When I got there, I believe it had just been implemented in that manner.
Okay. If I'm not mistaken, we are currently in the CALEA process of getting certifications.
We are, yes.
Do they do a full certification of CALEA based on the full program, or can you get approvals by piece parts?
I'm not sure what that means.
I'm not aware if we've got a procedure that has been submitted and approved by CALEA that addresses just the property issues. I'm under the impression that our CALEA review is based on the whole functioning of the police department.
It is. That's sort of accurate. In our review in November when they came to the police department, the property and evidence room was reviewed by the CALEA inspectors, and they asked several questions about what we intended to do with the property room.
To work with. So at this point, they haven't approved a change in procedures or any of this?
They were made aware that we anticipated a change.
Okay.
And didn't they treat that change with a positive response?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, the standards in law enforcement for property and evidence rooms typically does not include the use of officers to do that. So it's either a civilian position, which is very typical, or you have a dedicated police officer, and that's his only job.
All right. In the resolution that we're looking at, you have an $18,000 cap for the year.
Right.
But you're also discussing that you're anticipating using this person for at least 10 hours a week at $40 an hour, leaves me with 7 weeks not being covered whatsoever.
It's an average. It would roughly be about 9 hours a week to get to $18,000.
To work through. The last question I had was, how did we get to a $40 an hour part-time job requirement?
That was what we were paying our CALEA assessor assistants person in the police department, and have been. It's a pretty typical wage for law enforcement related duties that are above sitting on a parking lot. So it's a typical wage for a skilled person with prior law enforcement experience to come in and give you assistance and consult and complete a mission.
That's from the CALEA side, but if I'm hiring this person to be the clerk to handle property arrangement, do I need a $40 an hour person to do that job?
I think you need someone with experience to do it, yes. And I think that's a fair wage for somebody that is capable of doing that job, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief. Any other discussion on the resolution? Okay, seeing none, we'll have a vote. Roll call, please. Sorry, the matter before the board is to adopt Resolution 1128 as submitted. Roll call. Sorry.
Alderman Dimmitt,
Yes.
Alderman Kramer,
Yes.
Alderman Leahy,
No.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill, Alderman Plufka,
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims,
Yes.
and Alderman Weggie.
Yes.
Pass.
Okay, I count a vote of 7-1, so that resolution number 1128 will be adopted. And Chief, get that as an evidence room in order. Next item on the agenda is citizen comments. If anyone would care to come forward and address the Board of Aldermen, you'll be given at least 3 minutes to talk on the subject of your choice. I only ask that you state your name and address for the record. Anyone? Anyone? Okay, we're coming up on 2 hours, but I think we can get under it. I'm going to close citizen comments. We have a request from our city administrator to move into a closed session, which would be our second closed session. So I'd like to start that discussion by having a motion to move into closed session pursuant to 610-21011.
Very begrudgingly, I will move to go to executive session pursuant to section of the Missouri Revised Statutes, Chapter 610.021, subsection 1.
And that's,
And adjourn
that's
from-
legal. And
Sorry,
adjourn
legal.
therefrom.
And adjourn therefrom.
Second.
All right, moved by Alderman Plufka, seconded by Alderman Leahy. Is there any discussion on the motion? I don't know if the fact, Mr. City Attorney, if the fact that the motion is made grudgingly have any impact on? No, all right, very good. So, so we'll have a grudging roll call vote then, please. Alderman Weggie, will you be joining us?
I will not.
Okay, well, thank you, sir.
Alderman Dimmitt,
Yes.
Alderman Kramer,
Yes.
Alderman Leahy,
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Yes.
5 minutes, I'm going to be mad.
Alderwoman O'Neill, Alderman Plufka,
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims,
Yes.
and Alderman Weggie.
Yes.
All right, I count that a unanimous vote. So we're going to move into closed session. Let's convene in precisely 4 minutes in the conference room.
Precisely.
And we're going to adjourn from that meeting so you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.